going. I can't see the computer. I left my laptop at home for the weekend, so I'm using the desktop. I dragged the whole computer screen over, put it in front of the fireplace. A little daytime edition of Fireside Chats here with Mr. Moran. Hopefully you guys are having a fantastic day in school. Great weekend here at the Moran household, right? In addition to Emma being fantastic. She's just sleeping in the crib behind. Maybe she'll come out later and say hi. But first weekend, Starburst jelly beans went on sale at the grocery store. So you gotta get them, right? Because jelly beans by themselves are terrible. But Starburst jelly beans, that's just a little bit of heaven in the bowl right there. Come on. I didn't cut the hole very big in the bag because otherwise the kids eat them by the bag full. So, Starburst jelly beans, folks. Nothing better than life. So hopefully you guys are having a good day at school so far. I just wanted to touch base with you guys a little bit about tomorrow's quiz. All right, the quiz is going to be, everything's on your backpack for you in case you don't remember exactly what the quiz is going to be. The quiz tomorrow is on the entirety of Chapter 2. So that's sections 3 through, I probably can't eat these things while teaching because no, it sounds weird. But tomorrow's quiz, section 3 through 14. That's the entirety of Chapter 2. Make sure that you know what details for the infancy narrative are from Matthew's Gospel and what are from Luke's. There's going to be a nice little section there, about 10 questions, where it's like, choose A for Luke, B for Matthew. So make sure you're paying attention to that in your studying tonight. All right, I'll also put the notes up on your backpack. And please, if they're not there, if I forget to do this, somebody just email me. All right, I'm out at the retreat house today. I can easily just do it at some point during the day, so this way I don't forget. All right, but I'll try to remember. All right, so what I want to do today with you guys is just finish off the Matthew's account of the infancy narrative. In class on Thursday last week, we did section 12, talking about the actual birth of Jesus according to Matthew, right? And we talked about how Matthew's details as far as the birth of Jesus are a little bit skimpy, right? He doesn't give us everything all at once, right? Verse 18, it's basically like when Joseph learns that Mary is pregnant with the child Jesus, his plan is to divorce her quietly. Remember, and we said that the part of the mainstream idea of theological thought here on that is that Joseph thinks Mary did what? Anybody remember? Yeah, right. That's what everyone says. Adultery. Everyone thinks that Joseph thinks that Mary would have committed adultery. I gotta tell you guys, I don't buy that. I'm not of that thought. I don't think that if you know the person of Mary and you know Joseph, that you could possibly mesh the two together. That we could somehow think that here's a woman who's never committed a sin ever in her entire life, never done anything wrong, and then for one night she just decides to go out and gets pregnant from some random guy. I don't see it. I don't see how that matches with the Virgin Mary, right? And so after the angel appears to Joseph, I really think this is more just fitting in line with the Old Testament calls, right? These biblical calls where the person has an experience with God, given a mission, namely for Joseph, that he is to be the father of the Messiah, and then that person has a denial. I'm not worthy for some reason. Joseph's denial is that I'm not worthy to be the father of the Messiah. I'm not holy enough. I'm not ready enough. And the angel comes and basically says, no, you are. That's the fourth part, the reassurance. So after that, Joseph takes Mary into his home. And notice in verse 25, they bore a son and named him Jesus. No details about Bethlehem. No details at all about the census, having to travel to Bethlehem. No details about really any of that stuff. The manger, the stable, the inns, the shepherds, the angels saying no details about any of that stuff. All right? Turn the page on section 13. That stuff is review. Section 13, right, we get right into the visit of the Magi. And this is where we learn that Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Right? So it says, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem or Judea in the days of King Herod, behold, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star at its rising and have come to do him homage. Now notice, these Magi, these three wise men, they came from the east. The east was always symbolic for knowledge, right? A search for wisdom, a search for knowledge of the higher things, right? Of God, of virtues, of really the peak, right? Part of our lives. What can we understand as human beings more than anything else? And so here are these wise men who have been waiting for the coming of these prophecies. They're not even Jewish, but they know that the prophecies of the Israelite people, and so they're kind of monitoring the stars to kind of see if any of them ever become true. And they see the star, and so they go to Jerusalem to King Herod's house because they might be thinking, well, King Herod's the king, this newborn king of the Jews. Maybe King Herod would kind of know about this newborn king of the Jews. And they ask Herod, like, where is he? What does he say? And notice in verse 3 how Herod kind of responds. When Herod heard this, he was greatly troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Right? Because Herod is not happy, well, now we start seeing the entire Jerusalem is going to suffer as well. Right? People are not happy about the announcement that the birth of the newborn king. All right? So what does Herod do? He assembles chief priests and scribes. He gets together this team of scholars, and he asks them, where does it say that the newborn king will be born? They spit back in verse 6, and you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. What prophet is that? Anybody remember? If you said Isaiah, you're close. That's a good guess because he has a lot of prophecies, but this isn't Isaiah. This is the other guy. Micah, good. All right, so Micah, just go highlight prophet and just put the word Micah. And so we know that Micah is this. Remember, this is Matthew's Gospel, so he's going to refer to Old Testament prophets a lot because he's going to try to prove that Jesus is the fulfillment of the Old Testament. All right? So in verse 7, after Herod learns that he's born, that they should go to Bethlehem, he says to the Magi, go to Bethlehem, search diligently for the child, and once you've found him, come back to me here in Jerusalem and tell me where he is, so that in verse 8, as he says, I too may go and do him homage. Is that the truth? Is that what Herod actually wants to do to the child Jesus? No, he has no intention on doing him homage. He has intention on doing him harm. All right, Herod's intention is to kill Jesus, because Jesus is a threat. Even though he's just a baby, Jesus is a threat to his kingdom, to his rule, because he's the king. And he doesn't like having another king, this idea of a third or a second king kind of coming on the scenes that could challenge his rule. All right? Verse 9, after their audience with the king, the Magi set out, and behold, the star they had seen at its rising preceded them until it came and stopped over the place where the child was. They were overjoyed at seeing the star, and on entering the house where they saw the child with Mary, his mother. Time out. I thought he was in a stable. Why would they enter a house, right? So this is where the timeline gets a little shaky. How long after the birth of Jesus do the Magi show up? It's probably a decent amount of time, right? Because at this point, at least, I would say it's after when Jesus is presented in the temple at 40 days old. Right now, it appears that Mary and Joseph kind of go back to Bethlehem, right? And there, while they're in Bethlehem, that's when the Magi kind of appear. And we'll learn in the next section that it might have been upwards of 1.5 years to 2 years, all right, later. All right? So here come the Magi. They come in, right? They prostrate themselves and do him homage. They open their treasures and offer him 3 gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. All right? All 3 of those gifts are going to be symbolic of who Jesus is. Number 1, the gold is a symbol of royalty, right? All kings would have been decked out and had a lot of gold. That they would have worn gold investments, they had gold in their palaces. They would have had a lot of gold, the wealth of the royalty. Frankincense symbolizes Jesus' divinity. Frankincense was used in the worship of God in the temple, and so they present that to Jesus, symbolizing that he is God, he is divine. He's also a high priest who's going to offer sacrifices to God on behalf of us. And the third part is myrrh, which is symbolizing his humanity, his death. Myrrh is a burial spice that you would put on the body once you bury it to kind of keep the smell from the decaying of the body down until the tomb is sealed and all those things. All right? Now notice verse 12. After they finish their audience with Jesus and his mom and dad, do they go back to Herod or not? And we find out in verse 12 that they don't, right? Having been warned in a dream, they return back home to the east by another way. All right? Now, how do you think that's going to leave Herod? Turn the page to section 14. Let me just move this thing around, otherwise it's going to go dark on me. All right, there we go. To section 14. Herod is not happy. Oh, whoa. Skipped something huge. All right, go back to section 3. Sorry. From this section, I want you to notice there are 3 reactions to the announcement of the birth of Jesus that we see kind of come in play. Right? We see the reaction of Herod, we see the reaction of the wise men, and we see the reaction of the scribes. Right? So highlight verse 4, and we're going to write these 3 reactions down there. Notice, Herod. How does Herod react when he learns about the birth of the Messiah? It says in verse 3, he was greatly troubled. And we learn later that he seeks to kill the child. Herod is going to react with animosity and hatred and just disgust towards the mention of Jesus Christ and toward the hearing that he's alive. Right? The 3 kings, right? That one's easy also. The 3 kings respond with homage, with praise, right? Upon hearing that the newborn king of the Jews is born, that Jesus is born, they go in search of him. They want to do him homage. They want to worship him. All right? So you got animosity and homage and praise. Two other ends of this. Let me just put my finger in there. This way you can see it on the screen. 2 other ends of the spectrum, right? And the animosity and the worship. Or maybe this was the worship that was on. I don't know where it started with. Either way, 2 ends of the spectrum. Then you've got this other group, the scribes. How do they react? What do they do upon learning that the birth of the Messiah might have happened? What do they do? It's exactly what you guys are doing right now. Nothing. They do nothing. Right? They do nothing. Remember, these are the doctors of the law. These are the theologians. These are the people who have studied Scripture their entire life and are waiting for the Messiah. These are the priests, the scribes, the theologians, right? These are the people in charge and who you would imagine to be the most holy, the most in tune to welcoming the Messiah. And what do? When they learn that he could be born, they do nothing. We call that response indifference. Indifference. Right? So you got 3 responses: anger, indifference, and worship. I gotta be honest with you guys, I think those are the exact same 3 responses that people have in our current world to the announcement of God. Just trying to talk about God, talk about Jesus in other people's lives. Those are the 3 responses, right? You talk about God, and it just makes them angry. So there are a lot of people who are angry at God. They want nothing to do with God. It's not even though, like, it's like, I know, not only do I not like God, I can't have you liking God either, right? You see this a lot in our society where it's like the removal of any religious item or structure from, from any public lands, right? It's not enough that, I don't like God, but you're not allowed to like God either, right? And any person I've ever talked to that's really been atheist, it always stems from like this underlying anger or hatred towards this being that is God, right? To which I'm always wondered, like, how could you be angry at something that doesn't exist? If you're really an atheist, God doesn't exist, how could you be angry at him? But that's really what's going on underneath them, is that they don't have peace inside themselves. They're angry at God for something that's happened in their lives. All right? There's worship, right? When you talk about God to people, they're like, yeah, absolutely, I'm in. I'm going to do the best I can to worship. I'm going to seek him out. I'm going to go after him. I'm going to do what I can. And then the 3rd response, and guys, I think this is the worst one. It's that of indifference. It's the simple, I don't care. It's the not my problem type of response, right? It's like that, yeah, God's in my life, but he doesn't really matter to me. Yeah, it's Sunday, I don't really have to go to Mass. Yeah, I know I shouldn't be doing that, but I want to do it anyways. Or what difference does it make what I watch on TV or what kind of language I use or what music I'm listening to, right? It's that indifference that I'm in charge of my own life. Yeah, God's kind of there, but it's really not going to make any difference. That's indifference. And I see a lot of that in our society, unfortunately. And I think that's almost worse. That's worse than Herod, because at least Herod cares enough about the child. At least Herod is paying attention to the child. I think indifference is the worst. It's the worst. All right, now flip on to section 14 here, right? The flight to Egypt and the massacre of the holy innocents, right? Verse 13, when Herod learns that the Magi have departed for another way back to their land, he's not very happy. All right, so notice an angel appears in a dream and is going to say to Joseph, you got to get up, take the child and his mother, and go to Egypt, right? Because Herod is going to seek to kill the child. So let me just say, hey, Kylie, can you shut the door, please?
Yeah.
Sorry, the fam was down in the basement. I exiled them to the basement. John had to go to the bathroom. He came down the stairs with his pants in his hands because he's only 2 and he can't pull his pants up yet. And he left the door open in the basement. So I don't want you guys to get distracted by the sounds of Star Wars going on in the background. Anyway, so notice Joseph learns, through this dream that the child's life is in jeopardy. So Joseph gets up and takes Mary and the child to Egypt. Herod, as such, is going to still try to kill Jesus. So notice in verse 16, he's going to do something horrible. He's going to order that all the boys in and around Bethlehem are going to be killed. Any boy 2 years and under, in accordance with the time of the star's appearance that the Magi had told him. So we call these children, these 2-year-old boys, these children who were innocent, that were killed for Christ, we call them the Holy Innocents. Right? In the commentary, you can just highlight that their feast day is celebrated every year on December 28th. Right? So these are our first martyrs, right? These little children, these little boys who die because of Christ. Maybe they don't make some act of faith on their own, but they die because of Christ. Someone is seeking to harm Christ, and as such, they lose their life in the process. Terrible thing that Herod does here. He's just not a good man. Not a good man. Verse 19, once Herod the Great dies, right, an angel again appears to Joseph, right, it's like a couple years later, and says to Joseph, all right, you can now return back to the promised land, you can go back to Israel, because Herod, those people who have sought the life of the child was dead. But rather than going back to Judea, going back to Bethlehem, going back to where they had previously stayed, they learned that Archelaus, Pontius Pilate, is in charge, and they're like, no, we don't want anything to do with that guy, he's brutal. So they decide to go back to Nazareth. And God bless you, Emma. And that's where kind of the infancy narrative ends. All right, so that's it, right? That's Matthew's infancy narratives. All right, and then tomorrow in class we'll be taking a look at the baptism of Jesus and the temptation. All right, so make sure you study today for your quiz. Tomorrow, right? It's on sections 3 through 14. There's definitely going to be a big part where we have to pick out the details about what is in Matthew's gospel, what is in Luke's gospel as far as the infancy narratives, right? As well as other key terms and things like that. So make sure you do some studying. Some of you guys could really use a good quiz grade coming up, especially as the trimester kind of comes to an end. Projects are in the process of being graded. Still on track to have those grades to you by next week. So if you need anything, just email me, and I hope you guys have a fantastic day. All right, and I'll be back after school today once you get back from Selmara. So enjoy your day, ladies and gentlemen. All right, talk to you soon.